What in God's name is happening here? Do you want to kill her, Charlotte? Jeff Lockwood's voice crashes through the grand hall of his seaside estate, stopping everyone in their tracks. His wife, Charlotte, stands trembling with fury, gripping a polished rod. On the tiled floor lay 22-year-old Tiana Peter, her small frame curled into itself, uniform torn, back streaked with bruises that were still fresh. Her sobs echoed against the marble columns, a sound raw enough to strip the air of oxygen. Along the walls, the staff, maids, butlers, footmen, stood as still as statues, their faces tight with fear. No one dared move. No one dared breathe. And before I take you deeper into this shocking story of betrayal, violence, and the secret that changes everything, pause for just a moment. If you're new here, hit subscribe right now to Tales by Amani. We bring you the most gripping, emotional, and unfiltered stories that others are too afraid to tell. Now, let's go back inside that mansion. Because what Jeff did next, no one in that hall could have predicted. Charlotte's grip tightened on the rod as if daring him to take it from her. Her face was pale beneath layers of makeup, her eyes wild with something between fear and hatred. "She stole from me, Jeff," she spat, her voice slicing through the silence. "This maid, this nobody, dared to touch what doesn't belong to her." Tiana shook her head violently, tears spilling across her cheeks. "I didn't steal anything, ma'am. Please, I swear on my life, it's mine. It's all I've ever had." Jeff's jaw clenched as he stepped forward, his Italian leather shoes striking the tiles like gunshots. He caught Charlotte's wrist in midair, stopping the next blow from landing. The polished rod vibrated between them, its threat still alive. "Enough," Jeff growled. His 50 years had taught him control, but in that instant, rage blazed in his eyes. His grip was iron, and for the first time, Charlotte flinched at the man she called her husband. The rod slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor, its hollow echo dragging every gaze toward it. Tiana winced, curling tighter into herself, as though she feared even the sound might hurt her. "Look at her," Charlotte hissed, wrenching free of Jeff's hold. She jabbed a finger at the young woman trembling at their feet. "Look at what she's wearing. She flaunts it like a trophy. That necklace, our family's heirloom. The Lockwood crest engraved into gold. Do you think she found it on the street?" Jeff's eyes flickered down, pulled by the glint of something small and delicate clutched in Tiana's shaking hand. A locket. Gold, though tarnished with age. Its surface bore a faint engraving, an emblem he hadn't seen in decades. For a heartbeat, Jeff's world tilted sideways. He felt the air thin, felt his pulse thunder in his ears. His vision tunneled on that piece of jewelry, and with it came memories he had buried deep beneath years of business deals, charity galas, and polite dinners. Memories of fire. Of a farmhouse engulfed in smoke. Of a child's scream disappearing into the night. Charlotte sneered, mistaking his silence for weakness. "Do you see now? She's mocking us, parading around this house with something that belonged to your family. She's a liar, a thief, and you're defending her." But Jeff didn't hear her anymore. His gaze was locked on Tiana, on the tears sliding down her cheeks, on the locket pressed so tightly to her chest it seemed carved into her skin. "Where did you get this?" His voice was quieter now, but it shook with a weight none of the staff had ever heard before. Tiana looked up, her lips trembling, her eyes wide with confusion. "It's mine," she whispered. "The only thing I've ever had. They told me at the orphanage that my mother left it with me, when she abandoned me as a baby." Charlotte's laugh was sharp, brittle. "Do you hear this nonsense, Jeff? An orphan with fairy tales. She's playing you. She's been playing you since the day she walked through these doors." But Jeff wasn't looking at his wife. His gaze stayed on the locket, his breath unsteady. Because deep inside, he knew that engraving. He knew the delicate curl of the letter carved into the gold. He knew it as well as he knew the back of his hand. It was the Lockwood crest. And it had been buried, or so he thought, with someone he lost a lifetime ago. The staff shifted uneasily, their eyes darting between their employers, sensing something monumental unraveling before them. Tiana's sobs softened into small, desperate breaths, as if she sensed Jeff's attention had turned. For the first time, she saw not just anger in his face, but recognition. Charlotte stepped closer, her voice rising. "Don't let her fool you, Jeff. Don't you dare let her crawl into this family with lies. She's nothing." Jeff turned toward her slowly, his expression unreadable. His voice, when it came, was cold steel. "You nearly killed her, Charlotte. And for what? A locket you don't even understand." Charlotte faltered, her painted confidence cracking. I was protecting what's ours." But Jeff's eyes had already shifted back to Tayana. And in that moment, one thought echoed in his mind louder than the crashing waves outside. What if she isn't lying? What if the past I buried has come back home? The polished rod still lay on the floor, but now it seemed smaller, less dangerous than the truth unraveling in his hands. And outside the grand estate, storm clouds gathered over Newport, rolling in from the Atlantic, as though the sky itself knew that the Lockwood's carefully constructed world was about to shatter. The Lockwood estate slept under the restless whisper of the sea, its windows glowing faintly against the dark. But in the private library, light still burned. Jeff Lockwood sat alone at a wide mahogany desk, the Atlantic wind rattling faintly against the tall glass panes. In his hand, under the dim glow of the brass lamp, lay the locket. Tarnished gold, delicate chain, faint engraving. He turned it over and over, as though the answer to a question 30 years old might suddenly appear between his fingers. Around him stretched rows of leather-bound volumes, family histories, business ledgers, portraits of Lockwood's long dead. Yet none of them weighed as heavily on him as the object in his palm. His jaw tightened. How is this possible? He leaned back, and the chair creaked under his frame. His mind drifted, not toward his empire, not toward Charlotte's fury, but back to a night he had spent a lifetime trying to bury. The farmhouse had smelled of hay and smoke that night. Connecticut, 1989. He had been 19, back from his first semester at university, restless but eager for the quiet of his uncle's land. The Lockwood estate back then was not marble and chandeliers but wood beams and wide fields. His cousin Angela had been 6, bright-eyed, quick to laugh, forever clutching that locket as though it were a secret. The fire started after midnight. Jeff remembered the acrid sting in his throat, the sudden crackle of beams splitting under heat. He remembered her scream. "Jeff! Jeff!" He had run barefoot across burning planks, his lungs seared with smoke. He had seen her small hand reaching through the flames, the golden locket glinting in the inferno. He had tried. God, he had tried. But the fire roared louder. A beam fell, and then her voice was gone. By the time fire crews dragged him out, Angela was ashes. That was the story told. That was the version written into family whispers. And the locket, melted, blackened, was said to have been buried in the family plot. But here it was again. Whole, untouched, hanging around the neck of a maid who had never even heard Angela's name. Jeff's throat tightened. His hand shook as he set the locket down on the desk. He rubbed his face, as though trying to wipe away memory. The door creaked. He turned sharply. Tayana stood there, framed by the hallway light, still in her uniform. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her shoulders stiff with fear. "Sir," she whispered, "I didn't mean to disturb you. Mrs. Fletcher said you might want to ask me more." Jeff gestured to the chair opposite. "Sit." She did, timidly, her hands clasped in her lap. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Jeff pushed the locket across the desk toward her. "Tell me again," he said, his voice low, controlled. "Where did this come from?" Her fingers hovered over it, trembling. "It's all I've ever had, Mr. Lockwood. They told me at St. Mary's Orphanage in Providence that I was left at their gate as a baby. I couldn't have been more than a year old, wrapped in a blanket. And this was around my neck." Her eyes welled. "I never knew who my parents were. The sisters said maybe it was all they could give me before letting me go." Jeff studied her face. Her words were simple, unpolished, but there was no guile in them. Just the ache of a life lived without answers. He leaned back, trying to breathe evenly. Providence. Abandoned. A child left at an orphanage only months after Angela's supposed death. Could coincidence run that deep? The locket gleamed between them, its engraving almost alive under the lamplight. The door slammed open. Charlotte swept in, her silk robe trailing behind her, her perfume clashing with the smell of aged paper and sea air. Her eyes locked on the sight of Jeff and Tayana sitting across from each other, the locket between them. "What is this?" she demanded. Her voice was sharp, brittle, cutting through the fragile quiet. Jeff looked up, weary. "We're talking." Charlotte's gaze darted to the locket. Fury flared. "Still this nonsense? Jeff, she's a maid. An orphan. And you're sitting here at midnight treating her like she belongs in this family." Tayana stood quickly, flustered. "I should go." "No," Jeff snapped, sharper than intended. "Sit." Charlotte's jaw dropped. She turned her fury on him. "You're humiliating me. Defending her after what she did, after she dared to steal from us." Jeff rose to his feet, the weight of years pressing through his voice. "What if she didn't steal, Charlotte? What if she never stole anything at all? What if this locket is what it looks like, proof of a past we thought we buried?" Charlotte laughed bitterly, but her eyes betrayed fear. "You've gone mad. You're letting guilt play tricks on you. Do you want this girl to be your cousin's ghost? Is that it?" Jeff's silence cut deeper than words. His eyes stayed on the locket, his hands trembling. Charlotte's expression hardened. She spun on her heel, silk swishing as she stormed from the room. But as she left, her eyes flicked back at Tayana with something darker than jealousy. It was calculation. In the hallway, her breath came fast, sharp. She gripped the banister until her knuckles went white. Jeff was slipping from her, slipping into the hands of a servant, an orphan, a girl who had done nothing but exist in the wrong place at the wrong time. Not for long, Charlotte thought. If Jeff wanted to chase ghosts, fine. She would remove the ghost from their house. Back in the library, Jeff sank into his chair once more. He stared at Tayana, who sat small and fragile across from him, her eyes wide with questions. He saw the bruise forming on her cheek where Charlotte's rod had struck. He whispered almost to himself, "This shouldn't be possible." Tayana clutched the locket in her hands, as though it could shield her. "I don't understand what any of this means, Mr. Lockwood." Jeff rubbed his temples, his heart heavy with dread. "Neither do I. But I will find out." Outside, the sea crashed against the Rhode Island cliffs, relentless, unyielding. Inside, an older storm was beginning to stir, a storm that would not stop until the truth clawed its way out of the ashes of the past. The harbor glowed gold that evening, Newport's summer air humming with violins and the clinking of crystal. The Lockwood Foundation's annual gala was the crown jewel of the season, a night when senators, philanthropists, and shipping magnates gathered beneath white silk canopies stretched over the yacht club lawn. Cameras flashed at the entrance as Jeff Lockwood and his wife Charlotte descended from their limousine. Charlotte shone in a sweeping emerald gown, diamonds at her neck, her smile carefully rehearsed. Jeff's hand rested lightly at her back, but his eyes lacked their usual fire. His thoughts were elsewhere, on the locket tucked safely in his breast pocket, and on the quiet maid who had carried it into his life. Inside, the gala was a symphony of wealth and whispers. Tables gleamed with candelabras, champagne flowed, and a live quartet played over the sound of gossip. But behind the glitter, tension simmered. Everyone knew the Lockwoods. Everyone also noticed the way Jeff's gaze occasionally drifted toward the young woman weaving through the crowd with a silver tray of glasses, Tayana Peter. It happened in a heartbeat. Arthur Kingsley, a portly board member with too much champagne in his glass, stumbled as he turned. The contents of his flute spilled forward, arcing through the air like liquid gold, straight onto Charlotte's emerald gown. The room gasped. The stain spread down her bodice, dark and glaring under the chandeliers. Arthur fumbled for a napkin. I'm so sorry, Charlotte. My fault entirely." But Charlotte's eyes weren't on Arthur. They were locked on Tayana, who had been passing nearby with a tray. The young maid froze as Charlotte's fury ignited. "You clumsy little wretch." Charlotte's voice sliced through the ballroom. Heads turned. "Do you know how much this dress cost? Do you think you can ruin me in front of everyone?" Tayana's face drained of color. "It wasn't me, ma'am," she whispered, bowing her head. "He. I don't want your excuses," Charlotte snapped, snatching the napkin from Arthur's trembling hand and shoving it at Tayana. "Clean it. Now." The room fell silent. The quartet faltered, their strings trailing into uneasy silence. Phones hovered discreetly in the air. 100 eyes burned into the scene. Jeff moved before he thought. His voice thundered over the whispers. "Enough, Charlotte." Every head turned. His words hung heavy, charged with something no one expected. "She didn't do it. Everyone saw. It was an accident, and you will not humiliate her for it." The crowd shifted, gasping, murmuring. The billionaire defending his maid? The story was already writing itself in their minds. Charlotte's face went crimson, a cocktail of rage and disbelief. "Jeff, are you defending her? In front of everyone?" "Yes," he said evenly, his tone cutting through her hysteria. "Because she doesn't deserve this." The room pulsed with whispers. Politicians leaned closer, socialites smirked behind jeweled hands, journalists quietly typed notes into their phones. The great Charlotte Lockwood, scolded by her husband in public. Charlotte's hands trembled at her sides, the ruined gown clinging to her like a brand of shame. For the first time in years, she felt small, diminished in the very spotlight she had lived for. The gala stumbled on, but the energy had shifted. Laughter was forced, conversations thinly veiled. Everywhere Charlotte walked, eyes followed with poorly hidden delight. The queen of Newport society had cracked, and her husband had done the cracking himself. Later, in the limousine ride home, Charlotte sat rigid, staring out the window as the city lights blurred by. Her hands gripped the fabric of her gown so tightly her knuckles turned white. "You made me a fool tonight," she whispered. "In front of all of them." Jeff's gaze stayed on the passing water. "You made yourself one." She turned sharply, her face pale under the street lamps. "Over a maid. You humiliate me to protect her." Jeff finally looked at her, his eyes cold. "I protected an innocent woman from your cruelty. If that humiliates you, maybe you should ask yourself why." Charlotte bit her lip until it bled. In her chest, fury festered into something darker. The next morning, the mansion buzzed with gossip. Staff whispered about the gala, replaying the scene in hushed tones. Some admired Jeff's courage. Others feared Charlotte's wrath. Charlotte stood at the top of the staircase, watching them. Her voice, when it came, was sharp as broken glass. "Mr. Collins," she barked at the butler, "I want every servant's room searched. Every drawer, every locker. Tonight." Collins hesitated. "Madam, is that—" "Do it," she snapped. "If she didn't steal the locket, then she's hiding something else. I want her exposed." The staff exchanged uneasy glances. Tayana, dusting near the window, froze, her face pale. Charlotte descended the stairs slowly, her heels striking the marble like gunshots. She leaned close to Collins. "If we don't find proof, I'll make some." In his study, Jeff sat alone again with the locket. The scandal at the gala replayed in his mind, not as embarrassment but as confirmation. Tayana was no ordinary maid. Her humility, her resilience, her quiet pain, they all matched the kind of life Angela's child might have lived if she had survived. He retrieved an old photo album from a locked cabinet. Inside, beneath tissue paper, were photographs. Faded Polaroids of Angela, smiling with the same wide eyes, the same delicate chin that Tayana carried now. His hands shook as he traced the images. The resemblance was uncanny. And then there was the locket. Coincidence no longer seemed possible. He stood, his decision carved into stone. He would not let Charlotte's jealousy destroy the truth. He would not let fear bury the past again. That night, while Charlotte plotted against the maid she despised, Jeff called his attorney in New York. His voice was steady, deliberate. "I need a DNA test arranged immediately," he said. "Discreet, but official. The results must be undeniable." The lawyer paused. "For who, Mr. Lockwood?" Jeff's eyes lifted toward the hall where Tayana worked quietly, unaware that her life was about to change forever. "For her," he whispered. "And for me." Outside, the harbor wind rattled the windows, carrying with it the distant echo of gossip spreading through Newport's elite circles. The scandal was alive. But Jeff knew the real storm had only just begun. The storm rolled in from the Atlantic like a beast unleashed. Waves slammed against the cliffs below the Lockwood estate, the wind howling through the shutters as rain streaked the tall windows. Thunder shook the halls, rattling portraits of long-dead Lockwoods. Tayana Peter moved quietly through the east corridor, polishing the silver frames that lined the walls. Her body still carried bruises from Charlotte's last outburst, but she worked silently, the way she had been taught. Her humming, soft, almost prayerful, was swallowed by the growl of thunder. And then, the sound that froze her. Footsteps. Sharp, deliberate, heels striking the marble with a rhythm full of rage. Charlotte Lockwood emerged from the shadows, a polished rod gripped in her hand once more. Her emerald silk robe trailed behind her like a serpent's tail, her face twisted with something beyond anger, something closer to madness. "You've made yourself very comfortable here," Charlotte hissed, her voice nearly lost beneath the storm. "Walking my halls, wearing your little necklace, making my husband look at you like you belong." Tayana's breath caught. She stepped back, pressing against the wall. "Mrs. Lockwood, please. I've done nothing wrong." Charlotte raised the rod, her knuckles white. "Don't lie to me. You've poisoned this house. You've poisoned him. But I'll fix it. I'll end this before you take everything from me." The rod hissed through the air, stopping inches from Tayana's shoulder. She cried out, shielding her face with her arms. And then another sound crashed into the storm. A voice. "Charlotte!" Jeff Lockwood's voice thundered from the staircase as he stormed into the corridor, rain dripping from his coat. His eyes burned at the sight before him, his wife with the rod raised, his maid trembling against the wall. "What in God's name are you doing?" His shout was raw, dangerous, echoing through the halls. Charlotte froze, the rod still clutched in her hand. Her chest heaved, and for the first time, she looked uncertain. "She's lying to you, Jeff," Charlotte snapped, though her voice cracked under the strain. "This girl is manipulating you. She's been playing you from the start." Jeff stepped forward, his gaze like steel. He ripped the rod from her hands and hurled it across the marble. The clang echoed like a gunshot. "Enough!" His voice cracked with years of restraint snapping. "No more lies, Charlotte. No more games. We settle this once and for all." Tayana pressed against the wall, her breath shallow, her eyes wide with terror. Jeff turned toward her, softer now. "The locket," he said, his voice trembling. "You've had it since you were a child?" She nodded, tears spilling freely. "Yes, sir. They told me it was left with me when I was abandoned at St. Mary's." Charlotte barked a laugh. Sharp, broken. "St. Mary's? Convenient story. Don't you see, Jeff? She's crafted this little tale to crawl her way into your pity. She wants your money, your name." Jeff turned back to her, his face dark. "You think this is about money?" His voice dropped to a whisper, shaking with emotion. "That locket was buried with my cousin Angela the night she died in the fire. That's what we were told. But if it's here, if she's here, then everything I've believed for 30 years is a lie." Charlotte's lips parted, her mask slipping. "Jeff, you can't mean." "I do," he cut her off, his voice like stone. "If there's even the smallest chance this girl is who I think she is, I can't ignore it. I won't." The storm cracked above them, lightning flashing through the tall windows, illuminating the tension carved across every face. Charlotte shook her head violently, tears pricking at her eyes. "You're betraying me. After everything. You're choosing her over me." Jeff's stare was unflinching. "I'm choosing the truth." For a long, brittle moment, the only sound was the pounding of rain and the echo of the sea against the cliffs. Then Jeff pulled his phone from his pocket. His hand shook as he dialed, but his voice was steady. "Greg, it's Jeff. I need you to arrange a DNA test. Court authorized. Tonight." On the other end, the attorney hesitated. Tonight. That's highly irregular. Then make it regular, Jeff barked, his eyes never leaving Charlotte's. This can't wait. Charlotte's composure cracked fully. She lunged forward, gripping his arm. Jeff, stop this. Don't drag our name through scandal. Don't do this because of her. Jeff pulled free, his voice colder than the storm outside. You nearly killed her with that rod. You think this is about scandal? No, Charlotte. This is about the truth. And I will have it. Tayana's sobs quieted. She stood straighter now, though her hands trembled at her sides. For the first time, she saw Jeff not just as her employer, but as a man haunted by the same ache she had carried all her life, the ache of not knowing who she really was. Jeff's voice softened as he turned to her. If this locket is real, if you are who I think you are, then the life you've lived should never have been yours. And I won't let another lie keep us from finding out. Tayana met his gaze, her lips quivering. And if I'm not? Jeff's chest heaved. He whispered, almost broken, then I'll know. At least I'll know. Because living with ghosts is worse than living with grief. Lightning split the sky again, throwing the three of them into stark relief. The billionaire, the wife, the maid, trapped in a storm no weather could match. Charlotte staggered back, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Her voice was hoarse, bitter. You'll regret this, Jeff. You'll regret choosing her over me. But Jeff didn't respond. He stood like a statue, staring at the locket in his palm as thunder shook the house to its foundation. And in that moment, every lie Charlotte had spun, every secret Jeff had buried, every unanswered question in Tayana's life, they all pointed toward the single test that would either tear the Lockwood family apart or stitch its history back together in the harshest way imaginable. The storm outside howled, but it was nothing compared to the one brewing within. The Lockwood estate was silent 3 days later. Too silent. The storm had passed, but the air inside the mansion carried the same heavy stillness as the moments before lightning strikes. The staff whispered in corners, waiting for news, waiting for the hammer to fall. Every footstep in the marble corridors seemed louder, every creak of the old beams a reminder that something irreversible was coming. In the grand library, Jeff Lockwood sat at his desk. His hands rested flat on the polished wood, steady in appearance, though his chest rose with the uneven rhythm of a man who hadn't slept since the night of the storm. Before him lay a single sealed envelope. White. Harmless. Deadly. Gregory Adams, his attorney from New York, stood nearby, his expression grave. Mr. Lockwood, he said quietly, these are the results you requested. Chain of custody secure. No chance of error. Across the room, Tayana Peters stood near the fireplace, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were pale. She looked smaller than ever, a maid lost inside walls too tall, but her eyes carried the glimmer of hope she barely dared to believe in. And on the sofa, Charlotte Lockwood sat with her arms crossed, her emerald nails digging into her forearms. She was pale beneath her makeup, but her gaze was sharp, venomous. She had not spoken since Greg arrived, but her silence was louder than any scream. Jeff picked up the envelope. His fingers trembled. The weight of decades sat inside, a truth buried in ash and grief. He tore the seal with one motion, the sound slicing through the stillness like a blade. He unfolded the paper. His eyes scanned the lines. And then his breath caught. The document slipped in his grip. He tried to speak, but his voice failed. He passed the paper to Greg with a hand that shook like a man twice his age. Greg read aloud, his voice steady, clinical, final. Subject A. Jeff Lockwood. Subject B. Tayana Peter. Result. Biological match confirmed. Relationship probability. 99.98%. Tayana Peter is the biological daughter of Angela Lockwood. The words dropped into the room like stones into still water. Tayana gasped. Her hands flew to her mouth. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. All this time, she whispered, her voice breaking. I thought I was alone. I thought I had no one. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing openly. Jeff staggered back, gripping the edge of the desk as though the ground had tilted beneath him. His chest heaved with the force of memory. Smoke, fire, Screams, a child's voice lost in the flames. "Oh my God," he breathed. "Angela's child. You're her child. All these years, thinking she was gone. And you were here." His voice cracked, the iron billionaire stripped down to a boy haunted by guilt. "I failed her. I failed you." Charlotte shot to her feet, her face ashen. "No. No, this is impossible." Her words tumbled, desperate. "This is a mistake. Tests can be manipulated. Jeff, think. She's playing you. She's been playing you from the start." Jeff turned toward her slowly, his eyes hollow. "Do you think I don't recognize it now? Her face. The locket. The timing. Charlotte, it's real. She's real." Charlotte shook her head, panic rising. "No. No, I won't let this happen. I won't let her destroy us." Her voice rose, shrill. "You've ruined our name, Jeff. You've humiliated me in front of the entire city, and now you bring this girl into our family." She spun on Tayana, her words like venom. You're nothing but an orphan with a pretty story. You'll never be one of us." "Stop!" Jeff's voice thundered, snapping the room into silence. His eyes burned as he stepped between them. "You nearly beat her to death over that rod. You tried to erase her before the truth could be revealed. Do you think I don't see it now? You didn't want a thief punished. You wanted a witness silenced." Charlotte's mouth opened, then closed, her fury crumbling into dread. Jeff picked up the phone on his desk. His voice was ice. "I'm calling the police. You assaulted her. Attempted murder in my home. You'll answer for it." Charlotte lunged forward, her voice breaking into a plea. "Jeff, no. Don't do this. Please. Don't ruin me. I was jealous, yes. I was afraid. But I'm your wife. Don't throw me away for her." Jeff stared at her, and for the first time in years, his gaze carried nothing but cold certainty. "You threw yourself away the moment you raised that rod. You tried to kill my blood." He dialed. Minutes later, flashing lights painted the estate's stone driveway red and blue. The storm had passed, but outside, reporters had already gathered, tipped off by whispers that something monumental was brewing in the Lockwood home. When the officers entered, Charlotte's composure shattered. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks as they pulled her hands behind her back. "Jeff, please," she cried, her voice cracking. "You'll regret this. You'll regret choosing her." Jeff stood at the base of the grand staircase, his figure tall, unshaken. "No, Charlotte," he said evenly, his voice carrying through the hall. "I'll regret that I didn't protect her sooner. I'll regret letting your lies poison this house. But I will never regret the truth." Charlotte screamed, struggled, but the officers let her out. Cameras flashed wildly as she stumbled down the steps in handcuffs, the once glamorous queen of Newport society reduced to a spectacle. Questions rained down from the press. "Mrs. Lockwood, did you assault your maid? Is it true she's family? Will the Lockwoods survive this scandal?" Charlotte turned her face away, but the humiliation was carved into her features forever. Inside, the mansion felt suddenly lighter, though grief lingered like smoke. Jeff turned to Tayana, who was still trembling by the fireplace. He approached slowly, then placed his hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered. His eyes glistened. "Your family. My family." Tayana broke into fresh tears, but this time they were tears of relief. She clutched the locket against her chest as though it had finally, after years of silence, brought her home. For Jeff, the truth had cost him everything he thought he knew, his marriage, his carefully polished image. But as he stood there with the girl who carried his cousin's blood, he realized it had also given him back what he thought was lost forever. And for the first time in decades, Jeff Lockwood felt the weight of guilt begin to lift. The courtroom was full to bursting. Every pew, every corner, even the aisles buzzed with whispers as the trial of Charlotte Lockwood reached its conclusion. Reporters packed the back rows, sketching headlines before the verdict was even read. New England society had never seen one of its glittering socialites fall so hard, so fast. The judge entered. The crowd hushed. Charlotte sat at the defense table, her emerald gown replaced by a plain suit, her wrists bare of diamonds. She kept her chin high, her lips tight, but her eyes betrayed the truth. Fear. The prosecution laid out the case with precision. Photographs of Tayana's bruises, testimony from the staff, the DNA results that proved beyond doubt who the young maid truly was. Each piece chipped away at Charlotte's carefully built image until nothing remained but a portrait of envy and cruelty. When the judge finally read the sentence, his words rang out like a bell tolling the end of an era. Charlotte Lockwood, this court finds you guilty of aggravated assault and attempted bodily harm. You are hereby sentenced to serve 5 years in state prison. The room erupted in murmurs. Cameras clicked like gunfire. Charlotte's lips parted in disbelief. She looked toward Jeff, seated calmly beside his attorney. For the first time, her voice trembled. "Jeff, please." But Jeff did not look at her. He sat still, his face grave. And when the bailiffs led her away, the marble doors closed on Charlotte Lockwood, not as a queen of Newport society, but as a prisoner. The scandal dominated newspapers from Boston to Providence. Headlines screamed of betrayal, wealth, and secrets dragged into the light. Lockwood heiress found alive after decades. Family scandal rocks New England. Charlotte Lockwood sentenced in assault case. From Maid to Legacy, the astonishing story of Tayana Peter. But for Jeff, the storm was no longer shame, it was freedom. A week later, he stood at a press conference in downtown Providence. Cameras flashed, reporters jostled, but the room stilled when he stepped to the podium. At his side stood Tayana. No longer in her uniform, she wore a simple but elegant dress, her hair pulled back, her locket restored and polished, glinting under the lights. Jeff adjusted the microphone. His voice carried steady, solemn. For decades, I lived under the weight of loss, believing my cousin Angela had perished in a fire. But fate had another plan. Today, I stand beside her daughter, Tayana Lockwood. My family, my blood. The room rippled with astonishment. Jeff continued, his voice firm. From this day forward, she will no longer stand in the shadows. Tayana is the co-chair of the Lockwood Foundation. Together, we will rebuild not just our family's name, but its purpose, to serve, to give, to restore. Applause erupted, mixed with flashes from every camera in the hall. And in that moment, the billionaire who once built his empire on marble and steel rebuilt it on something far stronger: truth. Tayana leaned close, whispering through tears. "Thank you for giving me back what I never thought I'd have." Jeff placed a hand on her shoulder. "No, Tayana. You gave me back what I thought I had lost forever." Days later, the estate was quiet again. The scandals, the trials, the press conferences, they all seemed like echoes compared to the moment Jeff and Tayana shared in the rolling countryside of Connecticut. They walked along a winding path lined with old oaks until they reached a small cemetery tucked into a meadow. The air was cool, the sky a pale blue. Birds trilled in the distance. Jeff stopped before a headstone worn by time. Angela Lockwood, 1975 to 1995. 4 years, he had come here burdened with guilt, believing he had failed her. Now he stood not with grief, but with hope at his side. Tayana knelt, her hands trembling as she set a small velvet box on the grass. Inside lay the golden locket, cleaned, whole, polished until it gleamed. She whispered, her voice breaking, "Mother, I finally found my family." Jeff's eyes glistened as he placed a hand on the headstone. "And I finally found you, Angela. I kept my promise." They stood in silence for a long moment, the setting sun painting the meadow in gold. And in that quiet, something healed, not fully, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to let them both breathe freely for the first time in decades. The Lockwood name would never be the same again. It would no longer mean polished galas and spotless reputations. It would mean something truer. For Jeff, truth had cost him his marriage, his comfort, his carefully curated image. But it had restored what mattered more: a family. A legacy built not on appearances, but on honesty. And for Tayana, the girl once abandoned at the gates of an orphanage, it had given her a name, a brother, and a place where she belonged. As they left the cemetery, Jeff turned to her with a faint smile. Sometimes the truth breaks us. But in the breaking, we finally find what was meant to endure. Tayana slipped her arm into his, and together they walked toward the future. Not as master and maid, not as billionaire and servant, but as family. And if this story moved you, if it gripped your heart, if it made you question what you'd do if truth knocked on your door, then don't leave without hitting the subscribe button. Every week, we bring you powerful, emotional stories of betrayal, redemption, and the secrets that shape our lives. Your one click keeps these stories alive and helps them reach the people who need to hear the most. So subscribe, share this video, and let others feel the power of truth just like you did. Until next time.